Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show.
I saw 3 villagers strung up just outside the inner gate.
We must find a way to free them.
A Mandalorian and a Jedi? They'll never see it coming.
Yo, Mandalorian fans, Star Wars nerds, and our usual Shortbox Nation listeners, welcome back. And for our first-time listeners tuning in, welcome to the Shortbox Podcast, your soon-to-be favorite comic book and pop culture podcast. I'm your host, Botter, and this is the 5th episode of our Mandalorian Season 2 recap and review series. We'll be covering Episode 5, Chapter 13, The Jedi, so consider this your spoiler warning for the rest of the episode. We'll be discussing important plot points and other Easter eggs going forward. Joining me today is a panel of talented co-hosts like Miss Blythe Brumleaf, who's here with me at the Shortbox Studio.
Hello, hello.
Calling in is my right-hand man and co-host of the Shortbox, Cesar Cordero.
2 things. 1, may the force be with you. Second thing, I am at my father-in-law's house, so if you hear a dog barking, it's not me.
And last but not least, also calling in is a good friend of the show and our favorite Star Wars know-it-all, Mr. Lars Lundquist.
What's up, Shortbox?
But before we get into the main event, I have some people to thank that help us pay the bills and inspire us to make this show happen in the first place. First up, this episode is brought to you commercial-free by our sponsor, Gotham City Limit, Jacksonville's premier place for comics, toys, collectibles, and more. If you live in Jax, stop by the shop on Southside Boulevard and tell Ben the Shortbox sent you. Lastly, this show is made possible by the donations of our Patreon subscribers. The contributions from our Shortbox patrons go a long way in ensuring this show's longevity and the continued production of episodes like the one you're enjoying now. If you're interested in supporting the show and earning our eternal gratitude and some awesome rewards along the way, visit patreon.com/theshortbox to become a patron, or click the link in the episode description. With the sponsorship and credits out the way, let's go ahead and analyze this episode of The Mandalorian, starting with the credits. This episode has several new cameo appearances, including Michael Biehn as Lieutenant Lang, Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano, marking the character's first live-action appearance, as well as Diana Lee Inosanto as Morgan Elsbeth, a new character made for this show. This episode is written and directed by Dave Filoni and produced by Jon Favreau. This episode marks Dave Filoni's second time holding both writer and director credits simultaneously in the Mandalorian series. The first time was back in Season 1, Episode 5, The Gunslinger. This episode takes place on the forest planet of Corvus and finds the Mandalorian finally making contact with the Jedi Ahsoka Tano, the same Jedi that he was instructed to find by Bo-Katan back in Episode 3 of this season. Mando finds himself in the middle of a confrontation between the Jedi and the Imperial Magistrate Morgan Elsbeth, and in order to get the proper training for the child, he must help Ahsoka free the city of Calodan. Let's start off with my favorite part of these episodes, the Easter eggs. Did you guys spot any cool Easter eggs or cool references that maybe a casual fan would have caught? Lars, you got anything for us today?
Yeah, there's more Knights of the Old Republic stuff. Those HK-87 assassin droids that they had, the 2 droids were from that game as well. there was a couple Rebels references that you might have missed. The Loth Cat, which you also saw in the episode with Cara Dune under the table in the first season. That cat that was running around and like sort of puffed up its hair. Mm-hmm. You also saw when Mando was approaching Ahsoka's camp or whatever, there was an owl sort of overwatching, and there's like an owl associated with Ahsoka in Rebels. That most likely that was that owl. Tython was a reference to Dr. Aphra, which is dope because that's really exciting for me because she is like my fucking favorite. A couple other things here and there, but that's what I caught on.
I mean, I guess this episode was full of them, and a lot of them I didn't truly grasp until after the episode was over, diving into all of the YouTube videos. But I think Tython was probably the most significant after watching all of the YouTube videos and just what may come after they make that trip.
Okay. I've got two to note here that this is Dave Filoni has now directed Ahsoka Tano's animated and now live action debut. She made her first appearance in the 2008 animated movie Star Wars Clone Wars before the TV series of the same name launched. But the other interesting one I found was that Governor Wing, so the the magistrate at the end that gets his city back, he is played by Wing Ti Chow, who was a former Disney Imagineer. He played like a key role in Disney's expansion in like China and the Hong Kong markets. And he retired as a Disney legend, so Disney's version of like their Hall of Fame, after 37 of years of service to the empire that is known as the Mouse. So he had a cool governor position after all that hard work at Disney, and a role in Mandalorian. I thought that was kind of cool.
That's dope.
So how about we get into our initial reactions to the episode? I think this is safe to say that this has been among the most anticipated episodes of the season. I know that we've probably referenced it at least once per episode these last couple of recaps and reviews. We finally got it, and I wanted to know from you guys initial reactions and kind of high-level thoughts on it. C, what about you, man? What do you think about this episode?
Yeah, I think I've pretty much gone on the record a million times saying that I like the show a lot, and I think they're doing it right. One of the things I liked about the show, and I continue to like, is that anytime Favreau and Filoni introduce fan elements into the show, they don't do it just for servicing the fans. There's story involved. I was going to piggyback on Lars's statement about the owl too, man. That spiritual connection to the owl is definitely something that needs to be talked about regarding Ahsoka. But the last episode, if you guys haven't heard it, check it out. We reviewed that episode where they kind of name drop midichlorian counts, right? And I know a lot of people personally that kind of got mad about that because not many people are fans about that idea. But it took a while for me to kind of struggle with it, but I love it. Like, it's something Nazis would do. They would try to science the crap out of something they don't understand. And in this episode, one of the things I liked was where Ahsoka is more or less like, no, Mandalorian. The boy does not have powers. The boy knows how to wield space religion. There's two different things, and that takes some training. So that's one thing I really liked about it.
And see, if I recall correctly, in one of our first two episodes of this series of episodes, you had mentioned being really excited to see Michael Biehn make his appearance in the season. Did he live up to your expectations?
Not really, but in true fashion of the show, it treats basically, it's like like any other show from the 60s where like the guest stars are just there to, just for that reason, like guest starring whatever, and as the heavy Michael Biehn, right? And it was funny because I kind of didn't recognize him at first, and I'm like, oh man, that's Michael Biehn. Okay, cool. Like, it was neat seeing him. And, the whole time I couldn't do anything but think of like aliens quotes in my head the whole time.
Didn't he have like a rifle or some sort of like shotgun in Aliens too when he played Hicks?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool little carryover. Blythe, what about you? What you think about this episode? Did it live up to the hype?
I think it definitely lived up to the hype for me, just sort of, and I've explained this in past episodes where my fandom sort of stems from the movies. So a lot of these new characters, or they're new to me, with Bo-Katan and now Ahsoka, and to see this episode start from right out of the gate, you start with Ahsoka, her face, like those shots of her just like creeping through the shadows, the moonlit in the background, the lightsaber battles where you only see the first time we've seen, I think, in this series, lightsabers at all. So it was really, I think the way that they hyped up this character and then delivered on that is something that is very, very challenging in the world of fandom.
Well said. Lars, what about you, man? How'd this episode do to you?
Man, it really fucked me up because it's like, 2 minutes in, like she pops up. I made the mistake of watching it at work, like when I got in on Friday morning on my iPad with my headphones in, and the guy that I work with sitting next to me drawing must have thought my mom died. Like,
damn.
Like, I just couldn't talk for like 5 fucking minutes, pulled my headphones out, hands on my fucking head in my lap. Like, it was great. A lot of emotions. Not only did I think that it was a great episode, but just like all the thoughts about Ahsoka living in a live action world. It's just overwhelming to me, but all in all, great. I loved the episode.
Well said. And Lars, I got a question for you, because I think when we reviewed the 3rd episode, I think the Heiress, and we got to see Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan, we talked a lot about how cool it must have been for her to play a character that, she's voiced for so many years. And Lars, out of all of us, you've actually had the opportunity to meet Ashley Eckstein, the actress who plays Ahsoka in the Clone Wars and Rebels series. Do you know how she reacted to the character making her live action debut? Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox Store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I took a screen cap of her post on Instagram, and if you don't mind, I'll read it really fast. I mean, I think she's being very diplomatic about it, but she wrote, millions of people are meeting Ahsoka for the first time after watching her in The Mandalorian, and I'm excited for them to hopefully go back and watch her journey in Clone Wars and Rebels. Millions of fans already know Ahsoka, and her presence has come to mean more to them than words in a script. In Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Ahsoka became the eye of the audience. Viewers experienced the show through Ahsoka, and even though these stories happen in a galaxy far, far away, her feelings and emotions are very relatable to everyday lives. Ahsoka's strength has inspired, changed, and literally saved millions of lives all over the world. In turn, Ahsoka has become a beacon of hope, light, and genuine goodness. Everyone's relationship with Ahsoka is different because she triggers the memory of a certain point in a person's life where she inspired them. Even in the darkest of times, Ahsoka brings people joy, and that's what truly matters. There's a little more, but I think that's it gives me chills reading it. I'm happy she's at peace with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's kind of spot on, man. Like everybody basically projecting their own thing on what Ahsoka brings to their lives is something that I think is one of the most brilliant things Dave Filoni has done with that character. And like Lars said, she was very gracious about it. She didn't. A lot of actors they tend to get into their own heads and get egotistical about stuff like that. But also, she spent years working with that character and as a voice actress trying to, make the character more real. And she could have got a little salty about it. Maybe she did, but I think she handled it very well.
especially from like a public perspective. I think that was a brilliant quote by Ashley. And even going back to watching some of my YouTube videos, going back to watching sort of the history of why Ahsoka was created, Dave Filoni has gone on record, I guess, of saying that he brought her in with a lot of problems because he wanted the fandom or the fan base to have a lot of issues with her at first, and then slowly start to peel back those layers and make her more relatable and make that comeback story sort of more pivotal.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes to what we were talking about like last week when when Adam was with us and I brought up Ahsoka being a fan favorite, and he had corrected me that she wasn't always a fan favorite. So it sounds like
she was hated, but Dave Filoni did that with intention. Is what this I guess the story behind the character was saying, is that he did it with intention so that he could peel back those layers and in order to present her in a more relatable environment.
Hey, Botter, I was going to say that this is kind of something that you and I have seen in comics, the idea of introducing a younger character so that readers could get brought on board back in like the 40s and 50s. A character like Robin or a character like Speedy gets introduced, because the guy that they're sidekicking for isn't necessarily the most relatable person. And we're talking about Anakin Skywalker here, so that kind of also applies. It makes total sense that this sort of thing would work, and that if Dave Filoni, of course, I feel like Dave Filoni is probably a fan of comic books as well, and maybe he kind of took that as far as inspiration is concerned.
Yeah, I see. With you bringing that up, it makes me think about like the fandom that surrounds like Nightwing, like a character who started out as a Robin and then kind of was allowed, to mature in comics, which you don't see much of when it comes to like sidekicks. But Nightwing's kind of got like that loyal fan base following. I think that you can probably compare in this instance.
Wally West does too.
Yeah, good point. So I wanted to do something a little different with this episode. I wanted to kind of go through the episode and hit and talk about the major kind of beats as well as like the major kind of plot moments. Starting out with that opening scene that Blythe kind of already hinted or chatted about, the opening scene on Corvus, right outside the city of Calodan, where Ahsoka is making light work of some of the Imperial Magistrate soldiers and troops or whatnot. We also get Ahsoka giving her that, that one day to surrender and divulge her master's location, which at the moment, we're not really sure who the hell the master is. How about we talk about that opening scene and your thoughts on Rosario Dawson's portrayal of Ahsoka? Lars, what did you think? You mentioned, those first 2 minutes kind of got you emotional, but
yeah, I watched that first fight scene. Like I backed it up like a bunch of times. It was really slick. Like I loved like the double slice through the tree and then force pushing the fucking cutout piece. It was really slick with a little bit of like, how they seem to like to use some of the poses from Clone Wars or Rebel fights and stuff. And I saw like little bits of that in those fights, like trademark like Ahsoka stances and stuff like that. It was cool. I know a lot of people complain about her makeup and stuff like that, like her head tail's not looking the same as in Rebels, but I think that they did a really good job. I think she looked awesome.
Dude, I thought I was looking at the cartoon. I wasn't able. I mean, me and Blythe were talking about if it looked like a little bit of layer of CGI was added or something, but I thought she looked perfect, man.
Her makeup was great. I think I saw the biggest complaint were her head tails, because in Rebels, as the Togruta, like her species age, they sort of get bigger. Like if you look at like Shakti, which is another Togruta Jedi, hers are huge. She's like older, wiser, whatever. But they sort of shrunk them down, which was probably more of like a means of moving around and physically looking correct, So they just sort of took that little, liberty.
Anatomically correct, I guess.
Yeah. I will say Mandalorian, this series loves a good fog fight scene. Like they love to use that trick or whatnot. In this case, it was pretty badass because you got to let the lightsaber do a lot of, the talking in a way. What were your thoughts on that opening scene and that opening fight scene and the introduction of Ahsoka?
Oh, dude, I loved it, man. Like the idea of just a Jedi being introduced into this episode, and they kind of have to establish her as sort of a badass, because they're not going to make the mistake of assuming everybody has seen Rebels, even though they should, or that anyone has seen Clone Wars, even though they should. They're just going to be like, okay, well, how do we immediately establish that she is a force to be reckoned with? No pun intended. And they have her basically just lighting fools up in the forest, and these with no introduction really, just kind of like lightsabers ignite, and she lights these suckers up, and then more or less without it's I don't know. Like if you didn't know anything, you would just assume like, well, I don't know, maybe she can't be trusted. We don't know what's going on based on what they showed us. I just like that. There's sort of an ambiguity to it. If you don't know, I mean, of course, people that are fans are like, yay! But
what about the antagonist for this episode? Because in that opening scene, we do get to meet Imperial Magistrate Morgan Elsbeth, played by Diana Lee Inosanto. I thought they did a really good job off the bat. You know, one introducing us to a female Imperial kind of officer or high ranking official, and her being just as cunning, just as cold, just as like deadly as any of the other characters that we've met that have held a similar regard. I thought that establishing moment where she asked what are the lives of how many lives are you willing to sacrifice in order to get this information. I was like, man, they off the rip kind of established she is not to be fucked with.
And she can also like spin that narrative into making it Ahsoka's fault of what's happening to that town instead of the actual culprit, which is her. I mean, when you first like get the overview of the planet as Mando's flying in, you can see the wildfires raging, and I'm assuming that she's the one that started all of that, but she's just pillaging the planet, and you can clearly tell that there's very little natural resources left except for the area that she lives in.
Sorry, I wanted to correct myself from earlier. It's not Dave, it's Dan Inosanto. Dan Inosanto is basically a Filipino martial artist that was one of Bruce Lee's original students, which is kind of neat because he learned under Bruce Lee the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, which is essentially no one style is better than any other. You have to kind of know all the styles in order to be a fully well-rounded martial artist, which you can see in this episode. Safe to say she probably learned some tips from her old man because she knows how to handle herself in a fight. Yeah,
and she did all of her own stunts.
Of course.
So that kind of takes us to the next kind of major moment in this episode. The Mandalorian and the child arrive at Calodan. They're taken directly to Elsbeth. She offers him a Beskar steel in exchange for killing Ahsoka. And once again, another kind of, I feel like, trope when it comes to the Mandalorian. He's always kind of coming across these cities that have been, these towns and these cities that have been ravished. The locals, don't have much to say to him. It's kind of like you can just feel, and they do a really good job of kind of showing you the circumstances that the city and whatnot are in. It's a little bit reminiscent of episode 1 from season 1 or season 1 episode 1 where he meets the Imperial guy that gives him the job of finding the child.
Okay.
Werner Herzog's character.
Thank you, Werner Herzog.
Wow.
It was kind of reminiscent of that, where he he gets the job and he gets the reward being some sort of Beskar something. In this case, he gets an awesome Beskar steel or spear. So I kind of got like first episode vibes. I find that they kind of tend to do slight callbacks to previous episodes. So this one was kind of cool to see in this instance. The introduction of this new character that Morgan Elsbeth plays, having the same kind of enticing reward for him as
like
well.
The Beskar manipulation.
I was going to say that that's more or less kind of a recurring theme in the show, is that the Beskar kind of represents a connection to his culture, and that he's constantly being reminded that the evil powers that be will kind of have a foothold on who he is as a person. They kind of use it in the worst way possible as a means of manipulation to try and compromise on his morality. Will he compromise for the sake of his for who he is, which is awesome because every time the Mandalorian more or less kind of triumphs over that idea by saying, well, I define who I am, and that makes me an ambassador of my culture. Now give me that Beskar.
Well said, see. So after he makes a stop into the city, he gets the offer for the Beskar steel. He then makes his way into the forest. He finds Ahsoka in the forest. He tells her about Bo-Katan sending him. Ahsoka gets to meet the child. She communicates with him. We then get to learn that the child's real name is Grogu, and he was raised and trained at the Jedi Temple in Coruscant. He evacuated the temple. He's been suppressing his powers over the years to survive, et cetera, et cetera. I do think that this revelation here with the child's name and the child's backstory, I think that this might have been the most maybe I think the only ding against this episode across like multiple, just online discussion boards and things like that. I think people who typically review these shows had the most to say about the child's reaction. I think that might have gotten the most negative feedback when it comes to this episode. But I was curious to hear it from you guys. What did you guys think about learning about Grogu and having the child get a name and a backstory? Blythe, did it do anything for you?
I mean, I thought it was incredibly significant because the gatekeepers, I guess, of this franchise has been George Lucas, and he's never wanted to release the history of Yoda and his species on purpose. He was very much hand-holding Dave Filoni throughout this, Baby Yoda process. So in order to get the name and then also get the entire backstory of this character, I thought was huge. And to be able to explore that on a different level, that moment, that scene had so many different pathways that you could jump from Tython, from Coruscant to, who hid him initially in order to keep him safe and who else still knows about him. I thought it was very significant.
Lars, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting to come to find out that he has pretty much amnesia and was possibly trained by Jedi. We know he could have possibly been in the same room or around the same area when Anakin came in to strike down children. That would instill fear in me if I survived that. I would be I would shit myself for the rest of my life thinking that this motherfucker is going to be coming for me. But it put him in an era and in a place setting that I did not expect for his origin to come from, which is really interesting to me.
I was telling Blythe that this episode made me feel like I was reading one of those headlines that you'll see where it's like, unexpected, unsuspecting parents find out that the child that they adopted, is actually a 24-year-old living under their roof and shit. It was just real. I was like, damn, Grogu's got, Baby Yoda's got a whole backstory. He's got like a whole life. I think it took a minute, or it's still taking like a moment for me to, accept it, I guess, in a way. It was just like, wow, this kid's like lived a full life, and yet at first it kind of took away the appeal of like this very adorable kind of, baby character that, didn't really have much going on for him. And then all of a sudden, we kind of get this revelation, right? Boom, he's already been around.
And if you think about it, I mean, he is 50 years old. Think about how many Jedi Master trainers that he's been under, that he has trained with. There's a whole series of YouTube videos that I dived in from that aspect. But to see the look on his face when Din Djarin says his name for the first time, I thought was really heartwarming, because you have these two characters that are bonded, and that the series will evolve or revolve around them, and to exchange your names for the first time and to hear a father figure call you by your name for the first time, I thought was really heartwarming to see.
I don't think it's a good idea that we know too much about Grogu's past, just because the show is called The Mandalorian and it's not called Baby Yoda. And that's probably why it didn't sit well with a lot of people, that they're like, oh, okay, cool. So now you're telling me that this little kid has had a bunch of life, that, now it's raising questions that, from a storytelling perspective, you don't really want to do. It's something actually someone who doesn't know how to write will do. They'll just basically introduce weird story elements to kind of keep the plot going. I think the story has enough to keep it going. I don't foresee them really going more into Grogu's past, just because Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau kind of know that ain't the point of the show. I feel like it's kind of a mistake to basically try and put the transcendent in a box. I've said it multiple times, because that's kind of what the child represents, right? He's the spiritual connection on the show. And as soon as you start trying to quantify that, the magic starts to go away a little bit. Leave a little mystery to the kid. The kid should be mysterious, because especially as far as the Mandalorian is concerned, because he doesn't want anything to do with that, and it would be kind of interesting to see that dynamic. There's conflict there, which conflict equals drama equals, good TV.
Yeah, see, I think you might have encapsulated how I was feeling about that revelation. I thought it was like a little too much all at once.
But I think it's also important, too, that this is the first time that Grogu is meeting with somebody and how we don't even know how many years, and he's finally able to communicate. He's been with a father figure for a season and a half, however long this timeline is, and he's finally able to communicate. So it's almost like, wouldn't you want to just dump out everything that you do know if you're in that situation? Like, you would want to tell, shout from the mountaintops of everything that you've been through that you do know, because you can communicate with somebody for the first time.
I guess it was a little jarring because they just hadn't established him anything more than like an infant with, that happens to have force powers.
But we knew he was 50 years old, so he's seen some shit.
Yeah, all of this is not really, but like, if you're looking at it from a writing perspective, it's just an exposition dump. That's all it is. And if it's there to further the story, that's fine. But a lot of people felt like Botter did. The way it's like, I don't know, I can't explain why I feel this is weird, but it's weird. And that's just because what it did right was when he learned his name. That was awesome. And then when the Mandalorian looks at him and he goes, Grogu, and he looks up at him and he goes like, huh? Like that was cute. That works. But then like the exposition dump where it's just like, I don't know, oh, by the way, this happened. It's just reminded me of the scene in Spaceballs where they basically make fun of that, where they totally like just plot dump. And then Rick Moranis looks at the camera at the audience and basically says, everybody got that? Okay, let's move on. Like it doesn't need to be there. Show don't tell. That's all.
Lars, what do you think about Grogu being, having ties to the Star Wars lore in a wider scope?
I could see most everybody point here about it might be too much, but also it just sort of leaves things vague and open, but a little bit, I don't know, giving you a little bit of the carrot on the stick, I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I think it's interesting to think that he was around for that, and that he it gives you those questions like, how did he get out? Who hid him? Why did they hide him specifically and not, other children? Like, is there something more special about him than what is obvious and apparent? Why is his memory gone? What happened to him?
Lars, you got any best guesses as to who might have rescued Grogu from the temple?
So you don't know about a ton of Jedi that escaped. One that you do know in the comics which are canon, that survived for a little while after, is Jocasta Nu, and I would love for somehow they to do like the actor who played Jocasta Nu. She was a librarian in the Jedi Temple in the prequels. And she was in a comic series that sort of like, it was a Vader series, and she was running around after Order 66, sort of like securing Jedi literature and stuff like that to sort of save it from Vader and the Inquisitors going around pretty much trying to erase Jedi history off the map. So I don't know. I like that character a lot, and I was happy that they expanded on her in the comic books. So that would be cool. Obviously, a different person would have to play her, but she's really neat to me.
So kind of moving forward with this episode. So, Mandalorian meets with Ahsoka. He gets to learn about Grogu's past. They then team up to storm the city. They end up killing all the guards. They free the citizens. Mandalorian has his, ends up killing Lieutenant Lang. While Ahsoka engages in a duel with Elsbeth. Ahsoka ends up beating her and forcing her to divulge the location of her master, Grand Admiral Thrawn. And Lars, I want to kind of go back to you. What is Ahsoka's, I guess, relationship to Thrawn? Why would she be hunting him down so viciously?
Realistically, it's just her and Thrawn don't have any like super heavy beef specifically to Thrawn. At least something that maybe there's something that happened between Rebels and now. Realistically, her mission at the end of Rebels was her and Sabine were off to go find Ezra, which Ezra sacrificed himself to sort of like remove Thrawn from the picture by warping him into unknown space with these Purgil, which were like space whales that could use warp technology or whatever.
They traveled through hyperspace. Yeah,
they were able to travel through hyperspace. Anyway, but you guys should fucking know this by now because you should be watching Rebels. But that being said, her and Thrawn so far don't really have like a really thick history. It's really the bigger questions are, where is Sabine? does Thrawn now have Sabine in the attempt to find Ezra? So now is Ahsoka's mission also to save her friend Sabine and Ezra, wherever he may be? What's happened to Ezra? He must have spent a good amount of time with Thrawn. Ezra was tempted by the dark side many times by Maul and Rebels. He could be susceptible to, if he was stuck on a planet with Thrawn. I don't know. He is sort of weak in my mind. I like the character Ezra. But realistically, her and Thrawn, as far as we know, don't have a big past. I think it's like we're setting up for the biggest, I think most likely the biggest arc of this whole series is Thrawn is going to be the master villain, and he is scary as shit because he is smart, tactful, like he is everything that no other almost villain in Star Wars is. He's very scary.
Lars, and I became familiar with Thrawn as a character from the comic book series that Marvel put out a few years ago. I think it might have been like a 4 or 5 part series or something like that. But Drew had recommended it a lot because, you know, he loved the book. He loved the introduction of the character. And then when the comic came out, he saw that as an opportunity. He knew that I would read the comic books for sure. And I ended up falling, you know, I was fascinated by him because, like you said, he's like very cold, very calculating, but like a man of culture that happens to be like, you know, really freaking evil. I wanted to know, did you have any like recommended viewing or watching if you know our listeners wanted to learn more about the character Thrawn, or even, you know, like his relationship with Ahsoka and some of the other Star Wars characters?
So the original books that Timothy Zahn wrote were Heir to the Empire, which are not canon anymore, and Thrawn was originally introduced post Return of the Jedi, and he was a main villain to Luke Skywalker. And there was like a wizard that was like force sensitive that was trying to trap Luke and all this stuff. But none of that stuff matters anymore because when Disney took over, everything was sort of reset. And then Thrawn got introduced again in Rebels anew. I would say the best things to check him out in are the comic you spoke of, which is pretty much a direct adaptation of the new canon Thrawn origin book that Timothy Zahn wrote. I think that's a great starting off point. You know, it has a good origin story for him. That's pretty interesting. It sort of explains, I read some of the comic, but it was so like word for word almost to the book. I was like, I already read the book, so I didn't even pick up the rest of the issues kind of thing. It sort of explains like the racism kind of like, boys club in the Empire, and Thrawn sort of breaks that mold being like a alien, chiss, blue, you know. I would say that comic book is great. And then if, you know, you want to watch Rebels, which you should, you know, like we can only say it so many times, do that, you know. Those are the most relevant current things to him.
Well said, well said. See, how'd you like the scene with Ahsoka and Mandalorian storming the city and taking out the guard?
Oh, it was good. You know, it was cool seeing them team up. It's nice to see, like, I kind of look at this through D&D eyes, where like you have your, you know, you have basically a rogue and a cleric teaming up to jack people up. It's cool. Neat to see that they both have different things they bring to the table. It's just the visuals are neat looking as well.
And that scene in particular, it was a lot of the more silent moments, I think, spoke more to me, where they're not necessarily speaking, they're just almost facing off. So you have Ahsoka and the Magistrate that are facing off. They're not even speaking. They're just one character is at one side of the screen and then the other character is at the other side of the screen. We sort of saw something similar too with the first military guy, who is the guest actor for this series.
Michael Biehn.
Michael Biehn, and also Din Djarin. They also had a similar face-off scene as well. I thought that those really spoke to me because they did a lot of speaking without actually having to speak.
Yeah, Blythe nailed it. She nailed it. You have the basically the East meets West here. You have the scene where Ahsoka is squaring off against her antagonist the way Samurai would. But then you have, you know, the Mandalorian facing off against his antagonist the way a cowboy would. You know, it's great.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Mandalorian does a really good job of those type of fight scenes, incorporating like a little bit of maybe like some sort of horror elements. Do a really good job of making the violence subtle at times. And what comes to mind is when Ahsoka is on top of like the top of the fortress, and she manages to like cut the bell in half. As well as, you know, kind of alludes, awesome. You know, it's like a subtle, like you don't really see the troop that she cuts in half as well, but they kind of let that bell kind of falling apart and whatnot kind of speak for it.
And then when they actually did start speaking, I thought it was great how they, that Michael Baine's character was like, who do you think's going to win? Like that, you could hear each side and who was technically winning and who wasn't. And then he was like, oh, I guess my side lost. And then that's when they had their little face off.
I thought it was really cool to see Magistrate Elsbeth, donned the spear and get her hands dirty. Kind of once again, kind of spoke to how official the Imperial's high-ranking officers are.
Because she didn't have the guards that she had were not very good. She needs to hire or recruit better.
It was like Kill Bill, where the bride faces off against Oren Ishii in Japan. That's the vibe I got from it.
I felt like Dave Filoni was having a lot of fun with this scene because I think the mixing or something of the audio when it came to the lightsabers was very dominant. And I don't know if it's just because we haven't heard that throughout this series much between these two seasons, but I love the fact that they were just having fun with the lightsabers and letting Ahsoka do a lot of really cool choreography and stunts and just kind of let her overpower all the troops. It was just kind of fun to watch this moment,
It felt like her episode, and it felt kind of like looking back on it, this is the only episode we're probably going to get with her just because she was such a star in this particular episode.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad she's kind of isolated to just one, because I feel like maybe that would be something that would detract from the rest of it if she appeared in more, because she's such kind of an attention grabbing character. And I mean, it's Rosario Dawson, there's something there's also that star power there too. I'm glad that this is isolated. They isolated her to just this one episode, because that is one critique I did have, was that we kind of lost focus of Mandalorian and his quest in a way. Even though we got a lot of revelation about Grogu, it still felt like this was them kind of playing into fan service, as they should. It was kind of like a big anticipated episode. I knew. See, you resonate with that one.
No, but look. They're not just gonna. I have faith. I don't think they're just gonna do it for no reason. If Lars is right and Thrawn is the big bad, that would be awesome. But otherwise, I don't see a point in bringing him up, in which case, big mistake.
I was thinking that too. I was like, man, if they also throw Thrawn in here, that's a lot of characters that we've been introduced in these last 5 episodes. And it had a similar kind of tone too to episode 3, the Heiress, where Bo-Katan has a knife up to the Imperial officer's neck. Tell me what I want to know. And then, he mentions, the dark saber. I had a similar vibe here too, where it's another revelation, another puzzle piece. And you're like, well, where does this fit in? Are we going to see this later on in the episode? Are we still talking about Mandalorian upholding his honor and taking the baby?
That's also why I really loved this episode and the Bo-Katan episode, because they answered a lot of questions, but they also added a bunch more questions onto it. So for me, that's exciting as a fan to be able to, as soon as the episode ends, go and dive into the lore of all of the things that I picked up that I didn't quite know all of the history on. That's what is exciting for me with this series in the last few episodes.
So does that mean you guys are going to watch Rebels now, finally?
It's in our queue. It's working up there. It's working its way there.
No.
Damn you, Lars.
I've been watching. I feel like I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, so I feel like that's catching me up.
It's not the same, baby. It's not the same.
Oh, that's definitely the same thing as watching artists slave and write over something amazing in their own project. Definitely same thing. I feel like Lars and I, the term gatekeepers? I feel like Lars and I are the opposite. I feel like we're gate shovers. We're trying to push people through the gate. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you guys are shoving me into a locker, and I'm like, yo, you can't get out until you fucking
No,
watch.
not a locker. We're shoving you into a beautiful world. Why would you not want that? Shove.
Or a drug dealer, one of the two. And it kind of sounds drug dealer-ish.
Ahsoka also notes that the Mandalorian has become like a father figure to Grogu, encouraging him to take the child to those to the ruins of the Jedi Temple on Tython and allow Grogu to make his own decision whether he's going to be find a Jedi to be trained under or not. Was anyone surprised by this turn of events or anticipated Ahsoka turning down this role for mentor? And where do you think this goes next? Lars, I'll let you answer that first.
I think it's very interesting. I think how you said, too much Ahsoka could be a bad thing. So just her taking the child or sticking around with them probably wouldn't be the most interesting of places to go with the story. I thought that whole explanation of his fear and why she can't train him and then reflecting upon, she knew a Jedi, one of the best of us, that was corrupted by his attachment, or their attachment to someone, being obviously Anakin Skywalker, attached to Padme, attached to his mother's death, Shmi, and how that can change a Jedi and push them to the dark side. She's seen it happen and knows how bad it can be with someone so powerful. And the only other Jedi of the same species she's known is one of the most powerful, Yoda. I thought it was a beautifully well done explanation of why she does not want to train him, because she's been there. She's seen all this. She's seen the corruption to the dark side and knows how powerful and dangerous it could be. Fear is the mind killer.
But isn't she also fearful as well? That was a little confusing to me, is like, what is the definition of attachment? And how do the Jedi define it? And how do you, I guess, you let your PTSD affect your future decisions?
Well, the Jedi are baby snatchers. Like, they literally take children, like, before they can have attachment, they seek the children out before they can attach themselves to a family. Anakin was an exception, and he was not a welcome exception. Like, Qui-Gon had to step in and vouch for him. Like, no one wanted to train him, and there's a reason why. Realistically, he shouldn't have been trained, because he had too much attachment, too much of emotion from the experiences he had already been through.
I both 100% agree with Lars, and I'm completely disgusted at that is actually canon, because I can remember a time when Jedi didn't mean baby snatch, and it just meant, you devote yourself to this sort of code, this sort of weird samurai Buddhist code of religion where your transcendence doesn't depend on whether or not you can swing a lightsaber or how much you can do flippy flips. It just basically means, handle your shit and, make sure the universe is smiling on you. And more or less, Blythe, that's kind of what Ahsoka was trying to say, is that, look, yeah, I could train this kid, but there's no guarantee that the psychological trauma that he's gone through won't have any effect on how he views the world. And if you throw magic and power into that, then he could potentially be consumed by things that are wrong. And, Yoda agreed in a sense to kind of oversee Anakin's training. He wasn't directly involved, but he's got 800 years, or 900 years rather, of experience, right? And even then he was leery. Ahsoka has like none of that. And she's like, nope, not going to do it. I'm not even going to pretend. Not even going to pretend that this is something I'm going to try and tackle, because I've seen what someone who doesn't know how to handle their shit looks like. And that guy was a Jedi Knight. So this is a little boy.
Well, I would kind of call into question that, I guess, that whole thought process from the Jedi, because when I was watching some of the history and lore videos, they were talking about how there were two planets, and when the Jedi were, if you were falling a little bit closer to the light or a little bit closer to the dark, you would switch planets, and then you would meditate on that in order to find more balance and more of that gray area that has kind of been expanded on in recent years. And to me, that would be more of an approachable approachable way to the Force, because you are balancing yourself out. If you're scared, that fear leads to anger. It leads to the dark side. So if Ahsoka is scared in that sense, shouldn't she, I guess, go back to the ethos of the Jedi teachings and meditate on that in order so she can help a powerful being like Grogu? Because if she doesn't, if somebody from the light side or more of the light side doesn't, then that leaves the door open for somebody like a Thrawn or Moff Gideon to get their hands on somebody like Grogu and use it to their advantage instead.
Yeah, therein lies the problem with when people try to say that the Force is one thing and the Force isn't another thing. Like all those fan videos where people are like, the Force is about balance, and the Force is this, and the Force is male, and the Force is female. It's like, no, the Force is the Force. Like, it is basically an analog for religion. And some religions have a Buddhist approach to things where there is a yin and a yang, but some religions also deal with evil in a way like possession, where if you basically say, well, I can do the right thing and justify it using this bad stuff just because I'm trying to help, then the Force can actually possess you the way a demon would, and you wouldn't know it. So I think this is more or less the another reason why I like Filoni is that, yeah, there is the balance aspect, but I think he also doesn't negate the fact that the Force is also kind of space religion-y in the sense that, yeah, there's a devil side to it too. And in that sort of classic tradition, then you can get addicted to it. It can possess you. It can seduce you. And the way that happens is with fear. And as much as the Jedi love to kind of tout that, yes, we, I don't know, that's not fair. I don't think many Jedi in Filoni's universe are kind of like, yeah, we know everything there is to know about the Force. They're more or less kind of like priests than they are, I guess, Buddhist warriors or whatever. They're more or less like, look, we're custodians of this faith, this magic, but when it comes down to it, we really don't know how this shit works. We can only connect with it. And based on our own psychological underpinnings, how we connect to it is based on how we feel. And depending on how you feel, it could definitely depend on how you connect. And I think that's kind of what Ahsoka was saying, was like, look, this little boy is scared. He's very scared. And until he gets over that fear, we can give him the tools, but there's no guarantee that how he connects to the universe is going to be a positive connection or a negative connection. And I'm not skilled enough to guide him as a mentor.
I was going to say, she's basically saying, I don't have time for this.
That's what I got from it too. I was like, I got a whole series starting up here next year.
Got a lot on my plate right now. You need to handle this yourself. You're the dad.
Yeah, just the writer saying, reasons. She's not in the show anymore because reasons. Bye.
But I really enjoyed how Mandalorian kind of like knows his place. He's got a respect for the Force. It's something that, he clearly has no understanding about. And, it's kind of encapsulated whenever he says like, oh, you mean the child's powers? And she's like, well, it's not really powers. But I do like that Pedro Pascal plays a very good, He's kind of weary, but he knows that like this is the best for the child. When I originally saw that ending, I was like, damn, he's willing to give up Grogu relatively pretty easily. There isn't. I didn't feel like he was going to miss the child, but that might have been like him being very stoic and like this is the way. Like I promised to bring him here. I know I can't do much. I can't provide him the best life or the best teachings.
But also, it didn't take much convincing
like,
for him to be like, okay, I'll take him back now. Like he had his little moment where he's cradling the child, and you think that it's another one of those silent moments that nothing is said, but you can tell it's he's feeling like that's going to be the last time that he's going to hold essentially his child. And then when Ahsoka's like, no, I'm not going to train him, he doesn't put up much of a fight.
He's like, all right,
okay,
cool, bet. Fine. All right, where I got to go next? What's the next step on the shopping list?
Sorry, I was going to say, what do you guys think the over-under odds are that Beskar staff gets melted down to some little baby armor?
That would be so
yeah,
cute.
he needs it, for God's sakes. The satchel is not working. The little baby hammock is not protection. The ship is open the whole time.
That'd be cute, though.
I'm very conflicted.
Insanely cute. So we've got 3 episodes left in the season. Next week, we may potentially see Mando arrive at his destination at the Jedi Temple in Tython, where Grogu might make his decision regarding his Jedi training and overall destiny. And now that we've gotten the much-awaited Dave Filoni episode and the appearance of Ahsoka, I wanted to kind of hear from you guys. What's your best guess as to what happens next or the rest of the season? Do you guys think that this episode might have steered it in a different way than you originally foresaw it? And do you foresee any more cameos or maybe appearances? I haven't heard much details surrounding the next episode or the next ones. It almost feels like we were working really hard to get up to this episode, and now that we kind of got it, I do like the mystery aspect of like what comes next for these last 3 remaining episodes. We've got a ton of revelations. We've been meeting a lot of characters, and I still feel like, which is a good thing, a positive thing, I'm not sure where we go from here. Like how do all of these different characters and plot points and stories kind of collide, if they do, at the end of the season. Blythe, I'll start out with you. What do you think? Where do we go from here?
I think that I watched this really interesting video from a YouTuber called Star Wars Meg, and she was talking about how the importance of the armorer still plays. And if the armorer knew about the Jedi, knew and arguably was around served under Darth Maul, she theorized because of the helmet style of the armorer. She has the little horns on the top. Her armor is red and black. That was her idea. to send Grogu and Din off to find the Jedi. So if that was her end goal and now he can't find her, I wonder if she shows up in the next couple of episodes in maybe not the nicest way possible. Like, oh, congrats, you completed your mission. Maybe this was a setup to get him to find out where Ahsoka is and then, sort of lead him, because he still has a tracker on his ship. So does that lead to the nefarious forces finding out, about Tython, about Grogu? Is that almost like a setup, like an ambush for the villains of the series?
I wouldn't be surprised. I feel like Moff Gideon's got a lot of different resources, and I wonder how appealing it would be to offer the armorer, safe haven for other Mandalorians if they, I don't know. That's a very interesting one.
Because then he's gonna have to come to Jesus moment as well, because that's the person who has been his guiding light throughout most of the show. And if he finds betrayal there, then it really sort of cements the fact that the two of them are on their own, that they can't rely on anyone else.
My boy Dave sent me a script, so I'll let y'all know. They go to Tython, put the little baby on the fucking Force pedestal.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what? Lars has been leaking these scripts this whole time.
This is what I think. Okay, I'm gonna say what I think might happen is that they go to Tython, they contact a Jedi. It ends up being Ezra. Ezra's turned to the dark side because he also is a Jedi that was trained way too old and is attached to people like his family who died. I think he is probably at this point working with Thrawn now and with the Empire, maybe holding Sabine captive, trying to get a hold of Ahsoka for many reasons. And in that also pulling together, trying to get the child to do more Force sensitive midichlorian testing. And that explains Snoke. Bye.
Mic drop. Well said, Lars. See, what about you, man? You want to chime in?
I'm more or less I'm excited to see where this goes, and I kind of like what Blythe said, and I think it's kind of been the point of the show that the Mandalorian and the child don't really have anybody but each other, and I think if they keep that theme going, then the show will last a lot longer than people expected, because that's something. I mean, that's kind of how it is in the real world, and they keep saying this is the way, and I think that the Mandalorian has an idea in his head about what that is. But it keeps changing every episode because he keeps growing as a person.
I think it lived up to the hype. I think it opens, once again, it's another episode that opens a lot of doors, a lot of potentials. It's been interesting to see the success of this episode and what this series and what it means to the Star Wars franchise as a whole. I think it's cool to see the production value getting really, really good. I mean, it still hasn't. It still dawns on me like, man, I'm watching a serialized Star Wars show, every Friday. And it's a big deal. I see the headlines, I see the reception and things like that. And it's still fascinating to me that the success of this show has had such a bigger, and I'm sure it's debatable, but I feel like it's had such a bigger impact to like almost reviving the franchise. I think we made a joke about actually C brought it up in the first episode, the meme where it's like Pedro Pascal's back hurts from holding up the franchise so much. But this was another episode where I'm like, damn, like, yeah, you keep like coming out with content like this that does a good blend of like fan service and telling a good original like story. Like it's just exciting to see it like continue to progress and get better and better.
Well, I think one moment that I think will conflict fans a lot is because when they talk about taking Grogu to to the planet to be able to, I guess, send a signal out to the Force, if that comes back and it's Luke, I think a lot of fans are going to be really upset. I personally would not be upset, but I think a lot of fans would be upset tying in the Skywalkers back into this show. It's definitely been trickling in that they've been tying in all of these other franchises, but also with a lot of the conflict and a lot of the controversy around Star Wars, especially with the sequel trilogy. So if they incorporate that somehow, I wouldn't personally be opposed to it, but I feel like a lot of fans would be angry about it.
Lars, closing remarks either about this episode or maybe the franchise as a whole that you want to share.
I'm enjoying the ride, man. I'm just sitting back, chilling. Yeah, I'm having a great time, dude. No complaints. I don't have much to say. We haven't talked about David Prowse dying. Rest in peace.
Oh,
But that's it.
Oh, the original Darth Vader.
oh shit. Okay. No,
Yeah, he died yesterday. But
damn.
Yeah.
Yes, heartily rest in peace to David Prowse. The man had a good body of work behind him, working with people like George Lucas and even Stanley Kubrick. You know, he was in A Clockwork Orange. So without that guy, we don't have the man filling out Darth Vader. You know, rest in peace, dude.
Agreed. I echo that. Well, that is the end of our show, Shortbox Nation. How was it? Did we miss anything? Do you want to chime in with a thought or share something with us to read next episode? Let us know by sending us a short email at theshortboxjacks@gmail.com. I personally want to recognize and thank the people who made this episode possible. Our sponsor, Gotham City Limit. My panel today, Blythe Brumleaf, Lars, and Cesar. Thank you guys so much. And a big thanks to the group of Patreon subscribers that keep the lights on here at the Shortbox Studio, our Shortbox patron. If you enjoyed the podcast and you're in a position to contribute or donate to support the show and keep this thing going, consider becoming a patron. We'll reward you with bonus episodes and other perks. Visit patreon.com/theshortbox to find out more. Thanks again for tuning in. You'll be listening to any other podcast, but you're here with us, and that means a lot. We'll be back next week to cover episode 6 of The Mandalorian. And of course, don't forget to check out our regular weekly episodes that drop every Wednesday, especially if you're a fan of comic books. In the meantime, have a great week and continue to make mine and yours Shortbox. It is the way.